Noah is a 22-year-old MTF-TM detransitioner, meaning he's a biological male who transitioned to live as a woman but later went back to living as a man. Not too long ago, hearing about someone regretting their transition was rare. But in the past 6 or 7 years, the number of people identifying as detransitioners has exploded. It's because trans activism took a sharp turn. Activists began pushing the idea that you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans, and trans men with large breasts and trans women with full beards were suddenly held up as valid. At the same time, activists fought to eliminate all forms of gatekeeping for the medical transition, and they unfortunately succeeded. As a result, a wave of mostly young people with complex mental health issues were fast-tracked into transition. And now many of them are coming forward with stories of regret. The backlash from trans activists towards detransitioners has been extremely hostile, and for a good reason. You see, detransitioners threaten the narrative. Their existence alone shows that not everyone who identifies as trans actually is, and not everyone would benefit from a medical transition. Anyway, let's react to Noah's story.
I'm Noah. I'm a detransitioned male. I was on estrogen for 4.5 years. I started transitioning at 18, and then I detransitioned about 6 months ago. Some people detransition and they don't actually regret transitioning in the first place. They see it as like part of their journey. Maybe they like the lingering effects of exogenous hormones. That's not me, okay? I view transitioning as the single worst mistake I've made in my life. It had immediate negative consequences with my family because they could just like not wrap their head around my desire to transition. I wanted them to use this new name and pronouns pretty immediately. They did not want to do that because they did not want to like affirm this identity. They were hoping I would like come to my senses. I did not. I ignored them. But yeah, it drove this huge wedge between us, and that was really hard for me because I was close to my parents. I'm still close to my parents. I went into my freshman year of college during COVID. This was all like the first year of my transition, and I had a really hard time making connections like on campus or anyone just because I was a very non-passing trans woman, and honestly I was never very good at like cohering to gendered expectations of women, so I don't know, I don't think people took me very seriously outside of like these, very trans affirming like social groups. Having a trans identity, constantly worrying about passing, about being misgendered, that kind of thing, it made me like incredibly neurotic, and I'm already like a neurotic person. I had facial feminization surgery. I do miss like my like strong brow bone. I don't like looking a little more androgynous like I do now. The biggest negative effects have been the lingering effects of estrogen. I have some gynecomastia, which is, really not like too bad, as you can see. My thighs are a little bit thicker than the average guys. But the annoying stuff is like below the waist. I'll be vague. Things like still work after being off estrogen. I have normal T levels, but my libido's kind of low. Function is like 50% of what it was pre-transition, and my fertility is up in the air, which sucks, but it is what it is.
It's a lot to go through at such a young age, and it seems like he has been very dedicated to be or live as a trans woman. And unfortunately, he had a very painful process. It was a very painful experience. It's interesting how it affected his social life. When I transitioned, I felt more and more comfortable in my own skin, so I also felt more comfortable being social. And I actually never thought about, how should I act like? How does a man act like in public? I never thought about it. I actually don't think about it now. For me, it was like mostly the physical stuff that made me feel dysphoric and that I wanted to change. For me, the goal wasn't to be a trans man. I wanted to change my female characteristics, right? And I wasn't necessarily trying to be a specific thing. Gender dysphoria has actually never been a part of my identity. But that's often the case with detransitioners.
When I was identifying as a woman, estrogen actually did like affirm my identity and made me feel good, but now that I'm living as a man again and not really identifying as one but viewing myself as a man, it horrifies me a little bit that I like put myself through chemical castration. I don't consider my transition to be part of some like wonderful journey. I feel physically and mentally stunted. I feel like a tree that grew in the wrong direction for 4.5 years. Now I have to break off the branch and like restart. I feel diminished. I'm angry at myself that I bought into a belief system that taught me I could become a woman if I wanted to. For me, rejecting that belief system has been an important step in healing.
He's so mature and also being quite vulnerable. I love it. He's willing to say some stuff that must be super painful to say out loud. I think one of the reasons why some detransitioners claim that them transitioning wasn't a mistake and they don't regret it is because it's a coping mechanism. I also think it can be true for some people, but I also think it's a way for them to get over the trauma or to move on, which is totally valid. But it sounds like Noah here is trying to be as honest as possible. And he's not into sugarcoating, and he doesn't want to cope or use some strategy to cope. And I admire that a lot.
So what I see a lot of, especially online, is people with no to low dysphoria transitioning in search of gender euphoria and to embrace their authentic self. Now, what does it mean to be authentic? Now, to me, it means to be true to yourself. When I was trans-identifying, I did truly believe that I was a woman. So I thought that when I did stuff like try to change the way I speak, walk, act, and dress to align with that identity, that I was being authentic. That was what I thought. In reality, I was running from my true self. I was being authentic to an artificial identity that had formed for specific psychological reasons. And I think this is obvious in retrospect if you go and look at my old videos. It looks like I'm putting on an act. I was, but it was an act, a 24/7 act that I put on for myself and the whole world, because I had to believe that this identity was legitimate. I think there are cases when trans identities are authentic, and there are like males who are very naturally effeminate and who integrate well as trans women. But this was just not the case for me. If you have to change everything about yourself in order to transition, it might not be truly authentic.
He's totally right. I know I'm going against my biology. I'm a 26-year-old woman, but I don't live my life that way. I have tried to change almost every aspect of my life so I can live my life as if I were a male. Is that me being authentic? Not necessarily, but I did it to alleviate a mental disorder. And it's a controversial way to treat a mental disorder, I'm aware. But in my case, it worked. I'm actually happy, but unfortunately not everyone is after transitioning. And I think it's due to them not dealing with gender dysphoria. They're mistaking their psychological distress for gender dysphoria. I have tried since day one to be myself, no matter how that looks like. No matter how feminine I naturally am. And it's funny because I've received compliments throughout the years due to that. People saying, dude, I think you pass because you don't put on an act. You're being yourself even though maybe you speak a little bit feminine or you act a little bit feminine. My intent was never to be someone I'm not, to act like someone I'm not. And it may sound weird because I'm just being honest. Just like everyone else, I have a masculine side, I have a feminine side, and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed of my feminine qualities, my feminine tendencies, whatever you want to call it. I'm just trying to be myself. And I know that sometimes it can clock me. People will know, oh, that bitch is female. And sometimes it helps me pass even more. Because the problem with trans men acting hyper-masculine all the time, it unfortunately looks like they're lesbians and not men. My point is, it is a red flag if someone has to put on an act all the time, 24/7, and they don't feel happier after they have transitioned or while they're transitioning. That's a red flag. Then it shows that they're actually not gender dysphoric. They're maybe dealing with something completely else. As Noah said, if you have to believe that you are this thing, trans, let's say, that's not what gender dysphoria and transsexualism is about. It's about feeling it when you don't want to feel it. It's about feeling uncomfortable with your biology even when you're being completely honest with yourself, not being ideological, not thinking about others, social media, activists, or anything, politics.
So in the DSM-5, gender dysphoria is defined as a clinically significant distress or impairment due to a marked incongruence between one's experienced or expressed gender and their datal gender, lasting a period of at least 6 months. So, to be clear, I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria by a psychiatrist. Why? Because I experienced most of the symptoms that are listed. You have to meet 2 of them, I met like 5. Transactivists will claim that if you have gender dysphoria, then the only effective treatment is transitioning. You can't address it really any other way. And it's not going to go away on its own. It's going to be with you forever. That's a general belief. Since my dysphoria went away, by this logic, I must never have actually had gender dysphoria. The question is, how do you explain my symptoms? And the way I explain it is that I believe my dysphoria was actually a product of the trans identity rather than my trans identity forming because of the dysphoria.
Actual transsexuals don't need to identify as trans. They don't need the trans label, not even the transsexual label if you think about it. Because they're just gender dysphoric people who are happy after they have transitioned, medically transitioned. Our transition is not our entire identity. We didn't want to be this way, yet we are. Where in Noah's case, and in so many other detransitioners' case, it's like they desperately want to be this thing that they're not, and that makes them feel uncomfortable. Them feeling uncomfortable with that is not gender dysphoria. And also, I don't agree with the DSM-5's definition of gender dysphoria. Only 6 months. I know it says at least, but come on. I think it should say at least a year. Year and a half.
On some subconscious level, I wanted to be a woman and by extension, wanted to be trans. And once I developed the identity, genuine dysphoria followed because of the conflict between my sincerely held identity and my body. I couldn't justify transitioning unless I truly believed that I had dysphoria, so I recast negative emotions and little signs of gender nonconformity as signs that I was trans. And then in the present, negative feelings I have about myself, they would get centered around the gendered aspects of me, and it kind of became like an outlet for my self-hatred. When that subconscious desire to be a woman died, I found that my dysphoria actually went away, or at least the negative feelings I deal with now.
That's so interesting because in my case, and I know other transsexuals feel the same, we would feel gender dysphoric no matter what. It's not about what we think. We haven't convinced ourselves to be trans, to feel gender dysphoric. We don't want to feel it. But what he's describing makes a lot of sense, and I'm so happy that he's speaking up. Even though a lot of detransitioners talk about their experience, I think the way he's explaining it, what he has been through, and the topic in general, will answer many people's questions that they still have after listening to other detransitioners.
I'm either the only person to have this experience, my experience must be totally unique, or there is some portion of dysphoric trans-identifying people for whom the dysphoria is a product of their identity, not the other way around. Do I identify as a man? Now, I would say that I do not identify as a man. The reason being that my perspective on the world at the moment is that because I am a male, I am a man. There's no identification required. I don't need to dress a certain way, appear a certain way, or take any hormones to qualify as a man. I just am one by virtue of being male. It kind of frustrates me because people tell me when I tell them this, oh, that means you're non-binary, you don't identify as a gender. No, I really don't identify as a man. I don't feel like I have to. It just frustrates me that every perspective is valid. You can use z's or zers or its pronouns. Your gender can change bi-weekly. Trans men can be lesbians. You can have as many contradictory labels as you want. But when you fully reject the concept of gender identity, suddenly you're a phobe, even if you're not trying to impose that belief on others.
Exactly. Whenever I hear I identify as, I hear I pretend to be. Why identify as something? Why? As anything, basically. I don't get it. Whenever you have to identify as something, it must mean that you're not a thing. I don't necessarily think gender identity is real. I have never really understood the concept of it. What does it actually mean out in the real world? What do we need it for? And why can't we just stick to the truth? I adore Noah. I love how self-aware he is, and I hope he's not being too harsh on himself. And I totally understand how some other mental health issues, look like gender dysphoria. And that's exactly why I have changed my approach. I want to focus more on mental health, understanding mental disorders more, because making the distinction between certain mental disorders and gender dysphoria could hopefully prevent people from wrongfully transitioning, wrongfully identify as trans. Being obsessed with identifying as a certain thing is completely valid, and it sounds so cringe when I say valid. What other word can I use? My heart goes out to the people who have a certain obsession, people who are obsessed with identifying as a certain thing. It must be hard, it must be frustrating, and stressful. But I think the way to help those people is to actually listen to them. What are their symptoms? What are they truly experiencing, struggling with? Struggle is struggle, but what type of struggle are they going through? It's impossible to solve a problem if you can't identify the problem correctly, without political correctness, without being afraid of offending anyone. The truth will set people free in the end. Detransitioners are so beautiful and they're so smart. We need to listen to them more often. Because, as I said in the beginning, their existence alone debunks trans ideology. Detransitioners' existence alone proves that we need gatekeeping. And we can actually call it safekeeping. Society needs non-ideological doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, psychologists, to help these people, the people who think that they're trans when they're most likely not. That's all I have for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more content like this, remember to subscribe and the notification bell. Let me know what you think, and I cannot wait to read your comments down below. Peace out.